Hi, my name's Fran Nolan and I am Director of Account Services at Superdream, and I'm here today to talk to you about understanding audiences. The webinar is going to take about 15 minutes, so if you do have any questions at the end, then I'll be more than happy to answer those for you. So I've got some notes with me, so excuse me for glancing down because there's some questions that I want to answer. So I'll just read those out and then give you my response. I was also going to set my phone so that it's on stopwatch so that I do actually stick to 50 minutes because I do talk quite a lot, so it'd be good that I don't go over. So the first question is about my role at the company. And my journey to get there. So first off, I'll talk to you about my role. So as Director of Account Services, I'm responsible for planning and insight and account management and production. This means that I'm pretty much responsible for the end-to-end delivery at the agency. So when a client approaches me with a brief, right the way through to the delivery of that brief and the evaluation of the marketing activity. In terms of who's responsible at the agency for understanding audiences, everybody at the agency is. So it's key in marketing that you understand your audiences. I'm sure you guys know that already. But if you were to pick a specific role that it was their sole purpose, that is it's called an account planner. So I started off coming into Superdream as a planning and insight director, and now my role's slightly grown, but planning is still under my remit and something I'm very, very passionate about. A planner is responsible for representing the customer at every single point of the creative process, and therefore understanding audiences and being the voice of that audience is absolutely key. So how did I get here? Basically, I started off, my very first job was as a campaign exec. I worked on fashion and retail brands. Lots of fun, basically took orders, did what I was told and learnt a lot. And then I moved on to product management, which was a lot more around commercials. So it was based on understanding your return on investment. So when you do some marketing activity, how does it hit the bottom line? So that was good. But it was actually my next role with customer experience that was so important, that made me realise how important a customer actually was to the whole marketing process. It was this work I did with customer experience, where I did lots and lots of research, that I started to get a real passion for insight and research and understanding audiences. So I learned how to conduct my own research, learned how to facilitate research groups and things like that, and also how to do database analysis, which is really important. Well, more on that in a minute. So the next question is about how understanding audiences is important to my role. So this is key. So we're a marketing agency. If we didn't understand audiences, then we wouldn't have successful marketing campaigns, and therefore clients wouldn't be very happy. So it's very bad for business if you don't understand audiences. So I want to start with basics first and look into what do I actually mean by an audience. So in marketing terms, an audience is anybody that's buying or who would buy your product or service. An audience can be really, really broad or really, really niche. So if we take the example of cornflakes, that's a very broad target audience there. Even though there's subsections within that target audience, it is essentially a broad reach, versus something like a protein breakfast bar, which would be very specific, very niche market. So those audiences are very different. Sticking with the health theme, I'm going for a health theme now. It would be if you wanted to market a gym and you had somebody who wanted to use that gym because they wanted to beef themselves up and become proper ripped, versus somebody who wanted to use the gym for the yoga and the jacuzzi. A bit more like me. I like the yoga and the jacuzzi. The way you speak to those two types of customer is very, very different. The way that you talk about the benefits of using essentially the same service are very, very different to those different types of customer for you to sell them membership. So this is what Superdream basically does. It works with clients to understand who their target audiences is. Sometimes clients will know it already. They'll walk in and they'll know exactly who their target market is, but often they don't. So we will sit and talk to them about potential sectors, areas and opportunities that they could do marketing activity for. So the first question you ask when you sat there with a client is who are your audience? So if I use another example of let's say trainers, again, still a health thing. I'm gonna have to go to the gym tonight with all these. The trainers, if someone came to you, they had a brand new set of trainers, the first thing you'd want to know is, well, who are they designed for? What age range, what sex, are they male or female, and who's planned to wear them? Are they for people from the UK? Are they for people that live in cities? What are the key demographics? So this is what a demographic is. This is to look at somebody's age, sex, level of education, level of income. It's a very important term and often gets used in marketing. So to help with support demographics, marketers also use tools. These tools are called things like Acorn, Mosaic, and Cameo. They take the population and segment them into categories. For instance, in Mosaic, you have something called urban intelligence, which is a category around young, educated people living in urban areas. Another category that you have in Mosaic is grey perspectives, which is to retired people with traditional values. So you can instantly see which one I'm going to use to target really trendy trainers to, can't you? And basically what these kinds of tools help you to do is exclude whole markets, and what they also help you to do is they give you information. So with urban intelligence, I'll be able to look at these tools to know what kind of brands they like. I'll know where they're shopping. I'll know which kind of things they read. I know where they go on the web. I know how long they spend on the web, or on their laptops or on their smartphones. So you get loads and loads of information that help you build your marketing strategy as a result of that. So the next question is, what are the company processes? So from this perspective, when you're understanding audiences, it's the start of the process, and it's actually throughout as well. If you lose the plot on thinking about who you're doing your piece of marketing for, then game over. So it's really important that the first question you ask is who's the target audience, and if you don't know, you help the client define that. Something that often gets overlooked is understanding what a client already has. So if a client has a database full of customers, then you've got a really rich source of information. Another thing that often gets overlooked is whether the brief is for a B2B or a B2C client. So whether it's business or whether it's consumer, the messages are going to be very different, and the marketing approach would be very different. The actual key phrase for understanding audiences and ensuring that this is communicated throughout the agency is the brief. So if I was going to produce a piece of work that came out of the agency, a brief is always the kickoff of that process. So if my brief is going into a creative to design a TV ad, then the first thing they're going to ask me is who's the audience, who's it for, who's it intended for, because the visuals they'll use, the method, the language, how it looks, whether it uses humour, will all be based on who it's aimed for. And this is exactly the same if I was going into our development team and saying I want an app. The first thing they're going to ask me is who's it intended for, because it will completely inform how they develop that app, and what kind of functionality it has, what it looks like. So at Superdream, we have multiple ways of understanding audiences. So as I mentioned before, we would do customer database analysis. We'd use segmentation tools, which are Acorn, Mosaic, Cameo. And we'd also use media tools, things like TGI, which shows how people are consuming media, to what rate and frequency, and what types of people as well. But something we're really hot on here is conducting our own research. So we do a thing here called customer immersion, which means that we basically try and become the customer as much as we can. And we do this through various techniques. So we would do surveys. So we would talk to the target market and understand what their desires, their motivations are. We'd also do focus groups. Focus groups take surveys a level deeper, so you can ask more in-depth questions, and you can challenge people, and you can ask them, what do you mean by that? Would you buy this? Wouldn't you? Why? Explain it to me. And then this can then go even further to personal interviews, which means a focus group is a group of people. Personal interviews are one-to-one. And also observations are really hot right now, which is doing video diaries, getting people to keep journals, or actually just observing people, because often in research people will say one thing but behave in a different way. So it's really, really useful to push that out. What these techniques do is provide really important insight, which means you can reduce your reliance on mosaic and acorn segmentation, and you can develop your own segmentation, which is a really positive thing. This is called behavioural segmentation. So this is around looking at people's motivations, their life, their exposure, their experiences. Aspirations are really key in marketing, because often you're selling the dream rather than the product. So understanding more about people's aspirations and motivations is actually really critical for marketing strategies. Now I've been asked to give some anecdotes of why understanding audiences is so important. So I'll start with one that was a company I've worked for who did life insurance, and they were completely convinced that their people took life insurance out when they got a management role. And actually we did a piece of research which meant that we understood that this wasn't the critical point, that actually people took life insurance out when they had their first child. And therefore this piece of information enabled us to contact Bounty, who are an organisation that provide data on who's just had a baby, and we did one of the most successful marketing campaigns in the category and won awards for this because it was so successful. The second example I have is a current client we have is British Athletics. We basically help with their marketing to fulfill their events of championships, so Usain Bolt and Mo Farah, and we basically look at segments of their potential target audience. So they have a customer database already, and this database they can market to. It's quite easy, quite low cost. The database is probably the die-hard fans, the people that absolutely love athletics and rarely miss an event. Whereas we then found two subsegments, which were people that were sporting fans and also families who wanted a day out. What's really important about this identification is how you'd speak to someone who's a sports fan and how you speak to someone who wants a family day out are really different. Where you put their media is really different. So, for example, we would advertise on Radio 5 Live for the sporting fan, but we would advertise on Heart FM during the summer holidays for the family day out. So it's simple things, and it is obvious. However, you'll be surprised the amount of times people don't do this process and will just say, I just want to do some campaign and I'll do some radio and TV and not put the thought behind it. But it is really important, and it's critical to the success. In terms of what to avoid, I definitely say that with segmentation tools, it's really important that you take them with a big pinch of salt. Just checking the time, still all right, 12.5 minutes. When I did some work in New Zealand, I found that mosaic didn't work for me because New Zealand has a very small population, which means that often there'd be a big mansion next to a really tiny little wooden hut. People living inside them would be very different, with very different ideals. They shopped very differently and purchased very different products. So therefore it wasn't useful for me to know that they'd been lumped together in the same segment. So it's really useful as a segmentation tool, but you need to take need to just realise that they're broad brush and they make generalisations about population. A good way of seeing this actually is to put your own postcode into one of these tools and then see if you agree with how you've been categorised. I know mine wasn't right. Back in the day, I think there was one called a car booter, so I wasn't very happy about that one. Didn't feel it reflected what I did in my weekends. The next thing to really be careful of is wrong methodology. So when people are trying to understand audiences, it's quite common that they'll go and do a focus group when actually what they needed to do was a survey. So a survey will give you quantitative, it will show you exactly how many customers believe a certain thing or want a certain thing. Focus groups is about ideals and opinions, and often I see that decisions have been made on opinions and thoughts from focus groups when they're not as reliable or they're not statistically significant at all. So finally, to wrap up with tips for you guys, I have three tips. So my first tip would be see what's already there. So don't go out and commission research before you've really checked what's already available. As I say, a database that a client can have on their own customers will hold a host of information for you so you can understand their customers better. You can read a lot into how frequently that customer purchases, how recently they did, right the way through to the value of the transaction. These are all this is RFM analysis that I'm talking about, and really useful for retail to understand segments of customers. I'd say my second point would be understand the tools and techniques that are available for you. So I've mentioned a few on this webinar. I think it's worth investigating more. So there's some really cool stuff out there. So eye tracking is used regularly. So this can be used on a website to look where people's eyes go. So therefore understand their motivations, what kind of imagery they like, what kind of layout they like. Eye tracking is also used in stores. So people will have their eye movements monitored to understand where they look first and where they seem to be, their gaze seems to be to give us information. And there's other things around neuro, so people can get neuro pads on their heads to show which parts of the brain are firing. This is really important for recall because there's a different part of the brain that lights up when someone's remembering something versus experiencing it for the first time. So this gives people who do brand work a lot of reassurance that their brand work is working. Right the way through to biometrics. So this can be measurements of whether people's hair stand on the end, or whether their heart rate starts to quicken. There's actually loads of signs that people are getting engaged with what's being shown to them on the media. So definitely research all of that. That stuff's really good fun. And then the third is if you do get the budget to do your own research, then this is definitely the superior type of knowledge that you will get. Please ask the bigger questions. So if you ask the question of how would you to a customer, how would you improve this advert, you'll get a level of response back. But if you ask them different questions around what makes you laugh, what makes you feel emotional, you will definitely get a richer source of response back. But basically what you're trying to do is get the customer to share about their life, talk about their motivations and their dreams, and a really good piece of marketing will make a connection with that, and therefore it would be a success, and you would make a sale. So I do have some questions come in, so I'll have a read of those. Have you ever got it wrong? No, never. Yes, definitely. That does happen. Often, I think when you get it wrong is when you sometimes, and this is a bit naughty because this is often clients will assume who their target market is. And often so I've worked with a hotel in the past and they were convinced that they were a certain type of person used their hotel, and it was a difficult conversation to tell them, no, actually it was definitely because you are very near to a conferencing facility and you are one of many different options and you were available at the time. So getting people to understand when they might be personally invested in who their target audience is. So I have got it wrong because I didn't question the client enough at the beginning. So that was a big learning curve for me. So obviously you do it in a polite way. If it's somebody's business, you don't want to be like, I think you're wrong. But you do need to use your analysis and expertise to show them that, there is another way. So the next one, when you talked about different messages for different market segments, is there a danger that people receive the wrong message? Aha, yes. Now that's a very interesting one because there's certain schools of thought on this. There is that if the message is not relevant for you, that a human being will take it as noise. So this is the same. I'll try and use an example of a Facebook feed that you'll just scan past it. You won't even see it because it's not relevant for you. And the key is that the right message is relevant to the right person. If the wrong message, so this does happen sometimes, say for instance, a sporting fan is listening to Heart FM and gets the family message. We're not 100% bothered by that, because they're still hearing about what's going on and they're getting the communication to them. I think the only issue, you wouldn't tend to put a communication out there that would be so opposing. It's more about tweaking communication so that it will motivate someone within that segment to actually perform an action, pick up the phone, spend some money, whatever it is that you want them to do. Okay, I think that's everything from me though. So thanks ever so much for listening, and good luck to all you future marketeers out there. Hope to see you all soon.